Hi, I'm Ted, and I'm going to cut a bunch of circles with the Bohle Silberschnitt Studio Circle Cutter. Obviously, circles are pretty fundamental. They can be used for doing all sorts of things. Here are just some very basic examples of the way circles get used in kiln forming. There are obviously lots of other possibilities. A few things about the tool before I get started on actually cutting a circle. See, it features a suction cup, which is set and released with this little lever here. And it's got measurements that are cut as grooves into the brass arm, which means that not only are they easy to read, but they're relatively permanent. This is imperial measurements here and metric measurements on top. Find that I can cut anything as small as 7.5 centimeters with this and as large as 60 centimeters quite easily. It's a lovely tool because it is portable and incredibly versatile in terms of the size of circle you can cut. I'm going to use squares to cut circles, and these are sized to be 2 centimeters larger than the diameter of the circle I want to cut. And the reason that I've got them 2 centimeters larger is that way the closest my score line will ever be to the edge of this square of glass will be 1 centimeter. I'm going to actually figure out how to center my cutter on this glass by drawing a couple of diagonal lines corner to corner. That'll help me find the center. So just using my straight edge and a Sharpie. Okay, so that's my center point. And one of the great things about this tool is the suction cup actually has these little grooves in it that allow me to set it right in the middle based on those diagonal lines that I've drawn. So after I've got that set down, I use that lever to apply suction. It's actually strong enough to lift up the piece of glass, which means that my cutter is not going to move around as I'm making the score. The next thing I do is I set my measurement, and again, I know that I can be about 1 centimeter, I can be about 1 centimeter away from the edge of the glass. After I've set my measurement, I tighten that screw, and that keeps the head from moving or the housing from traveling back and forth while I'm actually making the cut. This handle here is on a ball bearing, so I can keep my hand on it and the arm just turns nice and smoothly with me. To make the score, I'm going to get a little bit of cutting oil on this brush, set it underneath the cutter and run that around. Now I've lubricated the area that I'm actually going to score. And then this has a self-tracking or a trailing cutting head inside of it that swivels so that as I make the score, the wheel is always kept right on track instead of being dragged across it to a certain extent, which is what happens when the cutting head is fixed. I'll show you that a little bit more later. I'm going to start by moving that without applying any downward pressure just to get that cutting head aligned or the wheel aligned. And then I'm going to put my finger, my left finger, or the finger of my left hand on the center here, grab this with my right hand, and go ahead and make the score. You hear that little click? That tells me I'm all the way back to where I started. Take my suction cup and relieve the pressure. Now I'm going to move this to the edge to run it. I take a pair of breaking pliers and just to this side of the score, I set them, and then I'm going to rock and pull out a little bit. And when I did that, you might have been able to see just a little bit of a highlight start to show up. You'll see a line appearing, and I'm just going to gently work this line around. So you see that score opening up while I'm running it. Again, I'm not using very much pressure, and I'm keeping my score pretty close to the edge of the table. All right, so now that score has been all the way opened. You can see that entire circle there. And now to break the circle out, I'm going to take a glass cutter and go just to this side of the score, and I'm going to make a little relief score there. Do the same thing here, and then one here, and one here. Notice how I was able to do that without having to spin the glass all around. Then I'll take a pair of running pliers. I'll go over to the edge and line those up with my score. Give it a nice little squeeze. You see that that score runs, but it stops right at the circle because the circle has already been opened up. And just like that, we've got this beautiful circle. Now I'm going to cut a small circle, and so I've got a small square. I'm going to start just like I did with the larger square by drawing a line from corner to corner to help me find the center of the piece of glass. Straight edge and a Sharpie. And again, I'm just using those notches in the suction cup to make sure I am centered on there, and then setting the suction cup like that. And now it should be holding on. Yes, it's holding on well. And by the way, you don't need to pick it up to figure that out. I'm just doing it to show you. Obviously, I need to adjust the placement of the cutting head, and so I'd mentioned previously that the smallest circle you can cut is about 7.5 centimeters, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and you can see that there are a few reasons why that would be the smallest you can go. One of them is the lever that you use to set the suction cup sticks out a little past the edge of the suction cup, so I'm going to run into that if I get too close to it. And then there's, of course, the suction cup itself. So we're going to do this. It's about 7.5 centimeters. I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of cutting oil. And instead of having it follow around, this is a small enough circle, so I can just draw it on there. And then, again, I want to just point out some things about my body mechanics. First, I'm going to get the cutting head aligned by just moving the arm without applying any pressure. Now that cutting head has swiveled into position to be following the track of the perimeter of the circle as I score it. I'm putting my left index finger on the top of the suction cup to hold it down, stabilize the piece of glass, reaching across with my right hand, and I'll use that to draw the cutting arm around and apply pressure. And as I do that, you'll notice I'm standing here right now. I'll actually step around so I don't end up running into my body with my arm or the cutting arm. So here we go. And you hear that nice little click right when we get to the end. And notice where I'm standing now. I am standing to this side, So I literally moved as I made the cut. I'm going to detach the suction cup, set the cutter off to the side, and now come to the edge, and I will run this circle. And I'm just getting a pair of braking pliers and using gentle pressure. You can see the circle starting to open up right there. I'm just going to gently work it around. Oops. All right, and now I can make my relief scores again, starting from just to the outside of the perimeter of the circle. Make a score, and this piece of glass is small enough that it's easy for me to turn it instead of moving my body around. So those are my 4 relief scores, and I'll run those one at a time, just nice and gently. Just open up that score. Let's see if I can find this one. There it is. There goes the first corner. Did I actually get all the way around? Oh yeah, there it is. A little trouble seeing it with the oil. It's over here. And just like that, we have another totally beautiful circle. And that is pretty much it. Again, you can cut circles from as small as 7.5 centimeters all the way up to 60 centimeters. It's a beautiful tool. It'll last a long time. Very portable and incredibly versatile.